Okay, so in this video here, we've just drawn our title block and our border around the paper. We've now drawn the three views representing our three-dimensional shape, okay, which was given there on the handout where it shows two of the three views, and you have to draw each one of the three views representing the multiple views of that particular 3D shape. The last thing you need to do on this drawing is you need to put in the dimensions. Okay, so notice here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dimensions. Where these are located, I would just simply recommend you putting them right there. You don't necessarily have to. So for example, that 5 inches, you could put it in the top view, or you could also put it in the front view. That would be your call. And I'll let you have some professional discretion there. If you are able to fit all the dimensions on here between the views, that would be the most ideal. So putting your dimensions in here inside between these two, or between these two, that's ideal, but you know, especially on paper, sometimes it's hard. So you might put the 5-inch dimension down here. That would be fine as well. Another thing you would generally dimension would be, for example, your 1-inch dimension. Here it's just simply to align, whereas if I were to mention it for the front view, it would actually show that corner of where or why it's 1 inch over before it starts sloping down. So it probably would make more sense to put that dimension here on the slope. Again, it's up to you. If you don't know, put it where it shows it here on the page. If you understand the idea that you want to dimension to the clearest example or clearest view, that's where you would put it right here. Okay. So as far as dimensioning goes, what you want to do is you want to simply start your line out a little bit off of your part. So let's say that I want to put this in for my front view here. Okay, I would simply start this line off of our part right here, about 1/8 of an inch gap. Okay, so just enough to be able to see that, okay, that's not touching, that's not part of it. Generally what you'd want to do is you would want to draw 2 extension lines. You would draw 2 dimension lines. You would freehand an arrowhead in here like this, from arrowhead side to arrowhead side. Okay, and then you would write your number. So in this case, it's just simply the number 1, and that number 1 would be about 1/8 of an inch. In my particular case, I drew that extension line a little too long, so I came back and I touched it up. You can briefly freehand it if your freehand is really precise. We want straight, crisp, clean lines. We don't want a bunch of crooked lines. So if your dimension line looks like that right there, as crooked as a snake, that would not be allowed for this type of drawing assignment. You would need to use a ruler, and you would need to draw, well, you need to draw with some precision or some accuracy. So that is how you would do a basic dimension. Extension lines here, the dimension arrowheads and lines, and then the actual number inside. Now off of this one, we can chain it on and add in our second one, which in this case would be the 5-inch long one. Notice that I had to bring that extension line up, so I'm going to draw this line over. I'm going to come down probably about 1/8 of an inch or so. Okay, I'm going to make a light line right now, and then I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to go back to our lines between here. I'm going to snap that off and then come right past our line just about 1/8 of an inch. So notice this line right there is now our dimensions. Our dimensions should be a little bit lighter than our object lines. I don't really cover that in AutoCAD these days until we get to line weight settings, but in hand drafting, you generally can make those, the construction lines, how light those were, would be fine for these dimension lines too. So I'm going to freehand in the arrow there, and over here, I'm going to come in here and erase a gap in here, and I'm going to write in my number. And so that is 5 inches wide. So I now tell it the part, here's my first dimension at 1 inch. I came up for my second dimension. Notice it's still touching the same line over here, but now it comes over and says that it is 5 inches wide. And I would simply go around and I would do that. So let me just go ahead and draw those in quickly and show those for you. Okay, so I drew up the 1.5 inch here. I'm drawing in my overall height, which is 2.5. So I've drawn in those lines, those extension lines, and now I'm putting in the dimension lines and the arrowheads. And I'm going to erase out my spot and put in the 2.5. What I want to show you though is I went to put in that dimension for 1/2 inch up, and notice that it's a really tight dimension in here. On the sheet, it actually shows you that they actually put the text inside and they put the arrowheads outside. If you find you can put it inside, that's fine, you're welcome to. If it's too tight and you know that it's going to be too tight to get both arrowheads plus the text in here, you can do like they've shown. So instead of this way, what I want to simply show you is how to actually do that on the outside. And really what you're going to do is, instead of drawing a line between the two extension lines, you would just simply draw your arrowheads coming out like so, and you would put your arrowheads out this way, and you would just simply put the text itself inside. So 1/2. It's a good idea if you can keep from it. Try not to let these dimensions and extensions lines hit your title block and your border if you're able to keep from it. Okay, so again, all these shapes are very similar in size as far as the 5 by 2.5 by 1.5 high. They're very similar in size. So over here on the sides, if you have somewhere in the neighborhood of 5/8 to 3/4, that should work with a 2-inch gap here. If you had an 1.5 inch gap here, you could have a little more over here, like 3/4 apiece. Here between this little bit of clearance and this little bit of clearance, it works out somewhere to about a 1/2 inch here and here, and about a 1-inch gap between your top and your front views. So again, and I'll try to show it here on this sheet. So 2 inches between your side and your front view, 1 inch between your top and your front view, trying to leave enough room for your dimensions. If you need to put your dimensions on the other side, so that 5 inches, if it needed to go down here, or if it needed to go up here, that would be allowed. Same thing for over here. That 1/2 inch right there, I wanted to put over here like you had on your sheet. If you chose to put it over here for the front view, showing that step, that would even be better. The text, if you can put it inside with the arrowheads, that's fine. If you need to put the arrowheads on the outside, that's fine too. These types of drawings, you want to make sure and use a ruler, because you're going to be measuring, and you want to use that straight edge to be able to draw. And so each one of these drawings, you're going to have the 3 views, front, top, right side, with dimensions, and with this title block here, with the border and your information inside the title block. As always, please let me know if you have any questions on this. I'll be glad to help you. I will also be giving you plenty of time to be able to work on it, so I will not expect a whole bunch of these drawings to be due the next day or something like that. I'll make sure and give you plenty of time for the packets to be able to work on those for the class.